What's up, crew? Today we have another banger theory from my homie Mel. We're going to be talking about Blackbeard, his ability to steal devil fruits, the potential for others to maybe be able to do that as well, and what all of this means for the future of One Piece. Mel has a fantastic theory that I'm going to help pick apart and add to hopefully throughout this video. And as always, guys, make sure to follow along in the comments if you guys have anything to add to this theory or to help debunk. Please let us know. We want to continue this conversation even after this video ends. But without further ado, I say we just get right into it. Mel, tell me what this theory is, fam.
Okay, so with this, I am basically going to break down how I believe that I have cracked completely most of the mysteries with Blackbeard and how to steal devil fruits, because I don't think just Blackbeard can do it. I think anyone can do it, but he is one of the few, if not the only, that could have more than one. I think possibly Caribou could, but I'll elaborate on that later. So, starting off with Blackbeard, first I want to break down some of the mysteries with him, including one of the most prevalent ones being, why does he not sleep? This will come into play a lot later, and it'll make a lot more sense why I'm starting with this. So, in Drum Island, we get the first notion that there are people who do not sleep through the night when Luffy and Sanji are going up the mountain, and Luffy offhandedly mentions, oh, hey, I've heard rumors that there are people who do not sleep through the night because they're from winter countries. And like, this feels like a super throwaway kind of line until we get like later down the road, we meet Blackbeard, we find out, hey, he can't sleep. And by this point, I think everyone's forgotten about that moment in
Absolutely.
Drum Island.
That felt like such a nothing burger moment, like you said, when it was first presented.
Yeah.
But adding that connection with Blackbeard, however many chapters later, was wild.
Yeah, and it's right around the time that Blackbeard and Ace are referenced in the story. Obviously, Blackbeard not actually showing up till like Jaya, and Ace a bit later in Alabasta as well. So we can tell that Oda was at least like consciously aware of that point for a while. Yeah, and we don't get confirmation that Blackbeard really doesn't sleep until Wano, when in the Odin flashback we see Shanks and Buggy talking about it, confirming that he doesn't sleep. And so that could reasonably show how it gets back to Luffy, because Luffy says he heard it in a pub. And who was Shanks always with when they were a kid in a pub? Luffy. So it would be reasonable for Luffy, being a fairly impressionable person, to hear that and just pick that up offhandedly from Shanks.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, Luffy first meets Blackbeard where? In a pub.
In a pub.
Yep, sitting, having some drinks, and eating some pie.
Yeah, was it good? Was it bad? Who knows?
God knows.
We all know that image, right, of Blackbeard as a kid just sitting out in the moonlight.
Mm-hmm.
In the colored version of that, I believe it was in the anime, but the official colored version of that, if you look around Blackbeard's feet, what is there? There is snow, implying that he is from a winter island. Mm. So I feel like that softly confirms what we are talking about. So the running theory is that Blackbeard has multiple personalities, which I believe is pretty much fact at this point. Would you agree?
I believe so. I'm leaning towards the fact that he has multiple personalities. As we flesh this theory out, this is kind of what makes me lean more into that. I've got a bit of hangups on that, but I think we can touch on those as we move forward. But generally speaking, multiple personalities certainly seems to be a huge trope for him. Or the simple fact of the loss of personality entirely, the fracturing of the mind, as we're going to get into. So I'm going to let you keep cooking on that.
The reason people believe this is because there's like inconsistencies with Blackbeard's teeth. There's 3 guns pointing to his crotch and his belt. And obviously there's when Nami says something to Luffy and Zoro about Blackbeard, and they both correct to saying their instead of his.
Mm-hmm. Also 3 skulls on his pirate ship. Or on his Jolly Roger, the 3 skulls on it, just another allusion to potentially 3 souls, things like that.
Yes, and that did lead a lot of people to believe that Blackbeard actually had a Zoan fruit called the Cerberus fruit, or like the Dog fruit model Cerberus, but that had been dispelled fairly recently, well, relatively recently, with the
10 chapters.
appearance. Yeah, with the appearance of Shamrock and showing that the Cerberus fruit was indeed actually in his sword. Which this is nothing new for One Piece at this point. We've seen tons and tons of items imbued with devil fruits.
Absolutely. I was happy that we got that Shamrock reveal, and not to say that I'm happy that the theory like collapsed, but I do like when we get a moment in the One Piece community as a whole where a full blown agenda or argument that we're going towards just gets fully confirmed or denied, but definitively. Shamrock having the Cerberus sword definitively separates Blackbeard from that theory, and love it or hate it, I like that we have confirmation that that is not it. Let's keep cooking on something else.
Yeah, that we have a definitive answer and that we need to keep moving.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
With the Cerberus fruit theory completely debunked now because of Shamrock, that does lead more into the multiple personality thing, which I do feel like does make a lot of sense with the inconsistencies. And so the Jolly Roger thing you mentioned, I'll actually tie in later with the Devil Fruit thing, because I think Blackbeard being the first person to do this and the theory I'm going to present definitely does like form that kind of connection. There's a specific reason why I think that he doesn't sleep that will tie into like the multiple personality thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we do actually see characters in the series with multiple personalities, most prominently being Cavendish from Dressrosa.
Yep.
We do not know what kind of island that Cavendish is from, but it's considering there's only 4 seasons, it's a 1 in 4 chance that it is a winter island. I think it's fair to assume that he is from a winter island. And so he does have that multiple personality issue as well. You can see in Dressrosa, when he sleeps, he is chained up out of the fear that that alternate personality does awaken.
Mm-hmm.
And that does come to fruition at one point. Because there is a clip in one of the episodes where you see his alternate personality awake, wrapped in chains while everyone is sleeping. So I believe that Blackbeard, due to some sort of trauma in his childhood, caused his personality to fracture, or he has the same mysterious condition as Cavendish. I'm not going to say definitively that Blackbeard has DID or anything, because that's a very serious thing to say, and I'm not a medical expert, but it is safe to assume that Blackbeard not sleeping would fall in line with Cavendish having to chain himself up while he sleeps to prevent that alternate personality coming out.
The first bit of him potentially coming from a winter island, it's a 1 in 4 chance. It may or may not be possible, but I do think that makes a lot of sense. I'm really curious if we will ever find out any more info about Cavendish in that capacity. I don't feel like he's that relevant enough of a character to get like another flashback at this point in the series, but at the same time, if where he comes from does matter and does make a difference to this theory, it could absolutely end up happening in passing or even be told to us in a cover story where for some reason Oda decides to show Cavendish going back home or something along those lines, and then that's when we see that it's a wintry island. And then on the point of being fearful to fall asleep, what boogeyman is waiting for you in the darkness when you fall asleep? Blackbeard's entire aesthetic is darkness anyway, but even back as a child or when he was still a pirate under a captain, you could see that he still wasn't sleeping at that point. So what is it that he's running from in the night or while he sleeps that he's so scared of, or that he would be willing to be awake 100% of the time? Another side point, this might be a tangent that's not worthy, but sleep surely is necessary within this world, even though it's not not heavily pushed. We never really see the Straw Hat sleeping outside of Zoro, but Oda has said each Straw Hat sleeps this much time. It's been mentioned that they all sleep. So would it be fair to assume that you have to be built different to be able to survive not sleeping in this One Piece world, as in that's an immediate assumption that you are inherently different from other, let's say, humanoid species that we're seeing that all inherently need sleep?
I do find it interesting as well, because the first time you meet Blackbeard, he's yelling at Luffy and Zoro about dreams, while ironically being the man that doesn't sleep.
Dreams being brought up by Blackbeard and him also inherently not ever having a chance to have dreams. If Blackbeard maybe for some reason just has a condition where he doesn't sleep, let's make a basic assumption just for this moment that Blackbeard simply has never slept. That means that Blackbeard has never ever been able to dream. He's never been able to have dreams. Everything that he's ever experienced has been right in front of him. There's no moment to hope for something better or to imagine something better, which could say that Blackbeard inherently has no ability to imagine a world different from the world he's inherently experiencing on a day-to-day basis, which is probably what makes Blackbeard such a bad guy at the end of it all. Ultimate power or destroying everything, whichever angle he ends up taking this from, it's him trying to manifest a dream that he cannot have.
that does go into why I think he is pursuing the One Piece, because I think as someone who can not physically dream, I think he's going for what he thinks a dream is.
Yes.
And as a side note, I do firmly believe that Blackbeard will be the person to first find the One Piece, like see what the One Piece is.
You think he will be the
And
first one to lay eyes on it?
so here's how I imagine things going. I think he'll be the first to lay eyes on it,
Okay.
not feel happy, not feel happy,
Yeah,
not feel any sort of joy, realize what he wants, fight in tandem with Luffy against Emu, and then turn on Luffy because he thinks being Emu is what he wants.
I'm going to push back on that ever so slightly. Not the totality of your theory. I think it's very, very plausible that Blackbeard does make it to the One Piece first, at least see it and comprehend it in whatever capacity. And it will be, for all intents and purposes, lackluster or underwhelming for Blackbeard because, you know, it is still not going to fulfill whatever weird dream he does have or whatever bastardized dream he has because he cannot have true dreams. With the Emu part of it, I believe that Blackbeard is going to be the one to kill Emu. I do not think it'll be like a group effort between him and Luffy or anything else. In my opinion, the way we've seen Blackbeard, every time he fights, he does something underhanded. No matter how you cut it, it's always some kind of underhanded fight. He doesn't fight clean one-on-one ever. That is not his shtick. He is truly a bad guy, and he's really just here for the win. There's no honor in fighting. There's no honor in pirates, all that kind of thing. Blackbeard is the most realistic pirate that we have depicted in this show all about pirates. He's actually for real a pirate for all the stereotypical things that we think a pirate is. So what I believe is that during the big fight with Emu and during a relatively climactic moment, Blackbeard is going to seize a moment of weakness from Emu while Emu is distracted with the big fight, arguably with Luffy, and possibly other Revs and everybody else who's in that. And Blackbeard is going to come in at the last moment out of a pool of darkness as he does, or maybe even teleport in with Van Augur's abilities. And just get an underhanded kill on Emu. And that could potentially lead to Blackbeard consuming Emu's abilities, or at least trying to. And then that would be the catalyst. Whatever effect that has on Blackbeard in that moment will be the catalyst to send him into full rampage, full crazy mode for the big ending climactic part of the story. Not to say that it will immediately end right there. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more things that need to happen in that moment, or up until the final fight with Blackbeard, but I see him doing some kind of underhanded tactic to low-key steal the win of killing Emu from everybody else.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. You just kind of like verbalized more of what I was kind of thinking, because I don't think it'll be a definitive like Blackbeard and Luffy, hey, let's team up, heck yeah, bro. I think it'll be like they are both going against Emu at once.
100%.
And Blackbeard's gonna be the one to get the kill.
Yes. Well, and the simple thing is the Will of D is Emu's direct enemy. Whether it's a good guy or a bad guy, the Will of D is an enemy to Emu, which means Blackbeard is just as much of an enemy to Emu as Luffy would be, or as Dragon would be, or even as Garp would be. You know, and that's the cool thing about this story. You have members of the Will of D within the ranks of Emu for all intents and purposes. Not to say that Garp directly works for Emu, but he obviously works under him. So Emu has direct enemies within his own army, and then we have direct enemies opposing him directly, i.e. the revolutionaries and Luffy, and all of our protagonists in that camp. And then you have the side antagonist with Will of D, as in Marshall D. Teach, who even still is also going against Emu. So quite literally, the world is against Emu, which why in the Harley text that we see literally everybody going against him except for the 5 Gorosei in that tiny little boat at the bottom corner of it. The actual world is against Emu. Emu is the greatest evil currently, and I think Emu's destruction and Blackbeard being the catalyst for it will be the final straw that catapults Blackbeard into ultimate bad guy status.
But enough for the future right now. Let's get back to what we were looking at in the past.
Yes.
So we've covered now why I think Blackbeard doesn't sleep. but onto his powers and abilities, because I believe there's a fundamental misunderstanding with how Blackbeard's powers work and what his fruit does. I believe this because we've seen that Oda is willing to lie to us about fruit abilities. I feel like that in universe that Blackbeard knows what his powers are.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he does, not like a Luffy situation where he didn't know that
Yeah.
he had the Nika fruit.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that we as the audience don't know.
Agreed.
Like, I believe in the universe they know, we do not. But Blackbeard's fruit, I believe, is a black hole fruit and not a darkness fruit, which to some that is like such a tiny distinction. But I firmly believe that it is the truth, because look at his abilities. They're even named after black holes. His abilities draw people in. He's physically incapable of being tangible. And this makes a lot of sense if his fruit is a black hole fruit, because look at like Punk Hazard, for example, or Alabasta with Luffy's fight with Crocodile. You can have torrential like advantages and disadvantages. Crocodile made Alabasta an absolute desert with the rain suppressants so he could have more sand to control.
Exactly. And so his inherent weakness was not near him at any time.
Yeah, that's why Luffy won, because of his blood and water. Aokiji and Akainu, they ripped Punk Hazard apart to have torrential advantages. Like, that's why one is like covered in lava and the other is ice cold.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they terraformed the entire island just so they could have their type advantages when they needed it.
Realistically, a black hole cannot exist where there is light. A black hole is the absence of all light. So that would make sense why that he cannot turn intangible, because even out in the middle of night, he's still being hit by the moonlight, artificial lights from like candles, lamps, stuff like that. You cannot escape light.
Yep. Unless he is in absolute, pure, legitimate darkness, he cannot be intangible.
Yes. And this is where we lead into the second part of the theory, how we steal devil fruits. As everyone remembers in Marineford, when Blackbeard rolls up, he throws that tarp over Whitebeard, crawls underneath, does some shit, and now he has the Quake fruit. There is an absence of light under there. That is like a completely blackout curtain they
100%.
threw over Whitebeard. So in that space, he could turn into a black hole and take in what he really needs.
Yep. In that space, he can activate the full power of his devil fruit because he is in a situation that is completely and utterly absent of light.
But so this leads into the second part of the theory. Devil fruit theft. Whitebeard got covered in that blackout curtain. According to my theory, Blackbeard went under, turned into a black hole, and absorbed something. I'm going to take us all the way back to Water 7, right? You remember when CP9 got their devil fruits, right? And you remember Jabra. He was freaking the fuck out. He was hiding behind like a desk or a couch or something. Yes, because he already had his devil fruit powers. Jabra says, oh no, don't bring that thing near me. Idiot, don't you know, if you possess those powers, it means a devil lives inside your body. For example, if I get close to that fruit, a devil would jump out and start fighting with the devil inside me, and my body would explode. Obviously, everyone wrote this off as just like, oh, he's being a superstitious weirdo, because there is so little info on devil fruits actually available to the general public, let alone the people in the government. I believe Jabra's right to a point. I believe that when you consume a devil fruit, it alters your brain, and a quote-unquote like devil tumor, for lack of a better term, is the best way I could sum it up. I feel like that grows on your head, and it will be important why it's on the brain specifically.
It's obviously been stated many times in a multitude of different facets throughout this story, like whether it's Jabra's level of superstition, which is very literal, people saying on a minimum level that devil fruits all have a will of their own. It would make sense, especially on your part of it having to manifest on the brain, like its brain is like forming next to your brain kind of thing. And that tumor is the manifestation of the will of that devil fruit within your body. I like that a lot.
Exactly, yeah. I firmly believe that it is a tumor that manifests on your brain. The best approximation I could really give is for anyone who's like read or watched Dorohedoro. You remember when En goes to the party it shows that people have a tumor on their brain of a devil, and that's how they can use like their magic or smoke. Yeah, like it is the devil itself just on the brain.
Hmm.
And so I believe that's what happens when you eat a devil fruit in One Piece specifically. With that being said, it would make sense then with Jabber's superstition on why two devils could not coexist in the same body. But I believe there's a way to steal them and put them into like people who aren't fruit users without tracking down the fruit itself.
There's a way to
So,
circumvent the process of that devil truly leaving the body once that person is killed.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I firmly believe this. And it would make sense on how people are able to like hunt down fruit users for their ability because we've seen this talked about in the series. But we do have examples of people being hunted down for their devil fruits.
Absolutely.
And I do believe that there's a specific way people do that, and I believe it's by harvesting the devil tumor in their head and consuming it, or like absorbing it in some way so it reincarnates into you. Realistically, that would make devil fruit hunting so much more plausible than just scouring the world for a random piece of fruit.
That makes a lot more sense, because what are the chances of actually finding where the devil fruit like remanifested? We have had a few examples of devil fruits manifesting relatively near to the person whom just died and lost the devil fruit, but at the same time, the gum gum fruit has evaded the world government for 800 plus years at this point, which inherently says that these devil fruits, it shows more that they do in fact have a will of their own, and it also means that they very well, it could be plausible that if, let's say, a devil fruit hunter is hunting down this particular fruit and they kill that devil fruit user, it would be fair to assume, with these devil fruits having a will of their own, to manifest somewhere far away from that person in that moment, because obviously that person is not aligned with the will for that devil fruit since they are killing its user inherently.
I swear this is going to draw back, but we even see that even souls have a will of their own in where they go. Like, look at Brook. When he came back to Earth, he wandered the Florian Triangle for a while looking for his body. So you can surmise that the devils that are these tumors are living things with a will of their own.
And which also, if you're going to say they are living things with a will of their own, it's fair to assume that they have their own soul.
And I believe you can capture them while the current user is dying or freshly dead and take that and consume it before they can leave the body and reincarnate somewhere else. And I believe the way Blackbeard did that is by going under the tarp, turning into a black hole. And keep in mind, when Whitebeard died, he had a massive gash in his head, like brain spilling out, like roughly like this amount
Exactly.
of his head, just
a
destroyed.
third of his head. Yeah, he had an open wound on his head at the moment of death, a very large open wound.
You could see his brain.
You could see his brain.
So it is relatively plausible to assume that Blackbeard goes under the tarp, turns into a black hole, and draws in specifically that devil tumor, or the devil once it's like woken up from being a tumor and is going to leave.
Blackbeard coming in and inherently interrupting the migration process that a devil fruit goes through after its host has died. So while that tumor is in the host, it is relatively dormant for all intents and purposes, and the host is just using the abilities that are provided to them by said devil fruit. But once that user dies or begins the process of death, that tumor begins to reawaken, for lack of a better term, and starts to exit the body and to go manifest wherever it feels like it needs to manifest again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that could play into like devil fruit awakenings as well, in meaning awakening in a much more literal sense.
Yes.
Because in some of this you could write off as being like shonen power creep and like just trying to make sure, oh, the good guy wins or whatever, but or the popular character wins. But you always notice that, like, I feel like the devil is asleep but not unaware of what's going on.
Agreed.
So I feel like fruit awakenings are the same like burst that a lot of characters right before they die get, like, you know, as like a last like bit of strength. And it's magically a lot more powerful than they were originally.
That push past your limits kind of concept.
Yes. And that's what I believe awakening is. Because, so if someone dies, obviously the the devil tumor is going to like wake up and try to save its host.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I believe that last bit of energy you usually see in a fight is. And that last bit of energy is also what causes a devil fruit awakening. So the devil is now actively awake as a tumor still
Yep.
inside its host. That's how you get like Lucci awakening and why Zoans as a whole, when they awaken, they tend to lose their minds.
My spin on what you're saying here, the way I look at it is when someone eats a devil fruit, that tumor does form. That devil tumor is a proxy for them to just gain the ability, the basic baseline abilities of said devil. So if you're an unawakened devil fruit user, yes, you are able to use the general abilities of that, i.e. Luffy has rubber man abilities and has found ways to apply that. But once you successfully awaken your devil fruit, like you said, it is quite literally waking up the devil within you. But as we said, devil fruits all have a will of their own. So when going through an awakening for a devil fruit, there's a couple things that have to happen to be successful in it. First off, you need to have a strong enough will or strong enough ability to use this fruit to get to the point of awakening that devil. But then once you do awaken that devil, you need to have a stronger will than the devil does, so you are able to subjugate said devil and completely use 100% of its powers. So when you see an awakened zone like Lucci, he was successful in having a stronger will than the devil fruit that he ate itself, so he is able to use 100% of those abilities. But when you go to the jailers and Impel Down, who are failed Zoan devil fruit awakenings, they did not have a stronger will than that devil. So that devil was able to actually fully take their body over, fully take their conscious over, and then they turned into more animalistic, instinctual beings as opposed to sentient humanoid beings. So all of that is kind of very crucial within this context.
Yes, and I think that would make a lot more sense, thinking like there is an actual living being that has woken up and is trying to take control.
Yes. Yes,
I think
exactly.
that would make perfect sense. So, what I think Blackbeard did under that tarp is when the devil fruit for the devil tumor for the Quake fruit awoke and was going to leave Whitebeard's body, because Whitebeard was still alive for like a little bit while he was still standing. So I think in that time frame before it woke up and left the body,
Hmm.
that's when the tarp was thrown over. Blackbeard went under, turned into a black hole. And when the devil tumor woke up and went to leave, Blackbeard drew that in as his pure black hole self, and it reincarnated onto the black hole, giving him that power.
Absolutely. Blackbeard being inherently a black hole fruit, as you specified at the beginning of this video, is able to draw things in. So him entering complete darkness is able, it allows him to use his fruit to the maximum ability, and maybe potentially not just being able to draw physical objects in, but also more spiritual, metaphysical objects like a spirit or a soul or something along those lines, which is why he was able to truly absorb the devil fruit that was trying to escape from Whitebeard in the moments of his death.
Oh, absolutely. To put it in a more like simple explanation, think like Kirby's copy ability.
Yeah, yeah. Kirby inhales you and then
Kinda,
gets your hat.
yeah, almost. It's like not exact, but it's a close enough approximation
Hmm.
to kind of get what I'm trying to convey across.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think everyone can hold two fruits, because it is a firmly established rule in this series that only Blackbeard has broken, saying that you cannot contain more than one devil fruit. And I believe like even like people that would theoretically know better, if that were untrue, have confirmed that yeah, you cannot have more
Yeah.
than one devil fruit.
It is definitive. It has been written. The whole point of Blackbeard's character is he is the thing that stands out from absolute facts. Like he is the physics breaking, world breaking character in this, which is what makes him so interesting and scary, and why we're even able to make videos like this on it, because we don't know. We genuinely don't understand. Because I think a lot of the community will forget to do this a lot of times, but when a writer says something in world, it's meant to be taken as gospel. I think we try too hard to assume things outside of what's directly said. If
Hmm.
If Oda says Mihawk is the greatest swordsman, or if Oda says through the world of characters that Mihawk is the greatest swordsman alive, we need to assume Mihawk is the greatest swordsman alive until directly proven otherwise. And same for
Exactly.
this theory. Oda has said through a multitude of characters at this point that you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, cannot consume 2 devil fruits and survive. That will end you. So why
Yeah,
the hell can
Blackbeard
Blackbeard do
existing
this?
specifically to break that rule.
Yep, exactly. He is the world-breaking character, and that's the point of his character.
Hypothetically, I've like talked this over with some people as well, and they've said like, "Oh, what about Caribou?" Because he kind of turns into some because he has kind of that pocket dimension
Yep.
type of thing with his as well. But I don't believe that Caribou can do this specifically because Blackbeard is a black hole.
Yeah.
He is meant to take things in,
Yeah.
whereas like a swamp is not.
Caribou essentially is taking things and putting them in his backpack, where Blackbeard is taking them and becoming one with them. He is consuming them, not just holding them, but genuinely consuming them. That's what black holes do, is they pull
Yeah.
all things in, whereas Caribou is literally just throwing stuff in his backpack. So I think that would be the distinct separation between their two abilities.
Yeah, and I don't think it's crazy to say that. I think that the Quake fruit is gone forever.
So if Blackbeard were to die today, the Quake fruit very likely would not re-manifest somewhere else
The
because
Quake
of
fruit will
whatever
never come
Blackbeard has
back.
done.
A black hole is where no light exists and nothing can escape. So since the devil went into that black hole and reincarnated in there onto the black hole, yeah, I think that fruit is completely gone. And I think this is also why I do, like I said, I do believe the multiple personality theory is true. I think we will get a Blackbeard flashback eventually showing a heartbreaking childhood. Obviously, not going to excuse like any of the awful things he did, but I
But
think we will
there's a
see
reason he's
what
so hurt.
possibly. Oh, absolutely, especially in that kid drawing, like I showed you,
Yeah, he looks so sad.
because yeah, under the impression that I raised earlier of like Blackbeard having the same condition as Cavendish, it would make sense that life would be less than ideal. Something too I feel worth bringing up is that you've seen Blackbeard looking through like the encyclopedia of devil fruits. I feel like he was going specifically for the Yami Yami no Mi with the intention of that black hole ability and being able to take another fruit.
So are you postulating
Yeah.
that the Yami Yami no Mi is part of the reason why Blackbeard can hold multiple fruits, whereas someone else couldn't? It's that devil fruit
Yes.
specific ability which allows him to break this world's physics. Because, like you said, the devil fruit is not coming in to coexist with the second devil fruit's not coming in to coexist with the current one that he has. It's actually being consumed by that devil fruit and just made into one.
Yes.
So he still, in fact, does not have quote unquote multiple devils fighting within him. It is still just
Yeah.
one devil and him.
Yeah. I think it's the devil fruit of the Yami Yami, the devil of the Yami Yami no Mi on his brain, but he consumed the Quake fruit through the black hole, which is the Yami Yami no Mi.
Yeah, so he didn't eat it, he didn't ingest it. It was consumed through the devil fruit ability, which is
Yes.
the line that makes him different from everybody else.
Yes. That's specifically what I think happened.
I love that idea.
I firmly believe as well that Emu and the Gorosei and like the hires of the world government harvest people for devil fruits
Without a doubt.
and then give them to holy knights.
Yes, I fully agree with that.
So coming into this, and this is kind of like the third act of this. So with the most recent chapter at time of recording being 1149, we obviously, spoilers by the way, we see Emu at the end take over Gunko and say, allow Mu to show you the dominance of God.
Exactly.
So obviously we see Emu take over Gunko. We see the eyes being the same as Emu. And what is Gunko's devil fruit? The arrow fruit. She shoots arrows. We have seen this before as well. Coming back to Cobra's death at the hands of Emu and the Gorosei, what was Cobra killed with? That same arrow. I believe that Emu once was like a person, like the king that Ivan mentioned. It was
Yep.
Iva, correct?
Yep. The king that Iva mentioned, Emu Nerona from the Nerona dynasty, and one of the original 20 kings that helped establish the world government as we know it today.
I believe that there was originally the Emu Nerona that got in contact with the original Sea Devil, kind of took over the body of Emu, combining their personalities. I think that any of the Holy Knights or people working for directly under Emu have a connection, like a two-way telephone connection with Emu via their devil tumors, because Emu is in part that original Sea Devil,
Absolutely.
which would allow Emu to use their powers independently, but also take over their bodies when needed. And I think it is specifically not aligning with true freedom, like Luffy, for example, that lets Emu be able to take them over. And I think that is sealed specifically with the Abyssal Mark.
Bare minimum, the Abyss Mark has to be the connection between Emu and the Gorosei and the Holy Knights. That is our grand connector between these three separate entities. And obviously, we have seen confirmed that the Holy Knights as well as the Gorosei seem to have similar abilities as far as regeneration, at least, or immortality for all intents and purposes. And that immortality obviously comes from Emu, because we saw Emu take all of that immortality and power away from Saturn, and that just turned him into dust, which shows that at the moment of signing said contract or selling your soul to the devil, which is absolutely what these Holy Knights and Gorosei have done, Emu being
Oh,
that devil,
100%.
when Emu puts that mark on you, you no longer age from the moment that happened. So all the way up until the moment you stop serving Emu, you will be locked in stasis at the moment you started this contract. And through that Abyss Mark is the way Emu is able to use your potential powers for themselves and also give you some level of their power. So you can, that is where that two-way telephone connection comes from.
Yeah, because like when you see like the Holy Knights show up on Elbaf, they don't show up via ship. They summon in with like the pentagram that
Mm-hmm.
all the elders were using.
Exactly.
Just on a side note, I don't believe like any of the elders have like devil fruit abilities at all. I
Agreed.
believe they are actual devils.
The Gorosei, quite obviously, when they're introduced in their full devil forms, it's not introduced with devil fruits, and Oda is very specific. Like when Gunko was introduced, she was introduced as the Arrow woman. Oda makes sure to let us know that this person has this fruit, and this is what it's called. The Gorosei did not have that even remotely. They just had the legitimate devil names, which are all real yokai or mythical beasts throughout mythology around the world. And they all very obviously represent those devils and have the same types of powers, i.e., Saturn being the Gyuki, and the Gyuki in actual mythology, if it's looked at, will kill you or potentially turn you to stone. It's got a couple interpretations, but either way, if you make eye contact with it, something bad will happen to you. And when Saturn was summoned into Egghead, first off, the commander said, hey, anybody under this particular level, don't even look at him or you'll die. And
Yeah,
immediately you see fodder marines looking at him and their heads literally explode. So they obviously have the direct powers of these devils, as opposed to it just being a fruit ability, which leads me personally to believe that the Gorosei are also inhabited by at least a second personality, and that I believe when they sign their contract with Emu to become a Gorosei level person, not a Holy Knight, but the Gorosei, you are opening your body to now be able to be possessed by the devil itself that you are presenting as. Another example that I have for this is when Saturn lands on Egghead. He specifically says, and this reminded me when the anime finally animated this, he specifically says, it's been quite some time since my feet have been on this earth. Or he says something along those lines. We'll have it on screen for this.
yeah,
I,
yeah. Distinctly remember that, and I
yeah.
think I took a screenshot of that because when I was reading, I was taking screenshots of so much
Mm-hmm.
just because there is very much dialogue in this where syntax is very like deliberate.
Yep. The concept here being that Saturn has walked this earth and has continued to walk this earth. And whenever we see Saturn sitting around with his other old homies, like, they are their actual original forms, in my opinion. They are the like that is the person who originally signed the contract. That's that person inhabiting that body. But when they go into their more demonic forms, like we see in Egghead, that is no longer that Saturn that you're seeing. I think that is actually the devil who, through the Abyss Mark connection, is able to manifest on the surface. These are actual devils who live in whatever the One Piece world's hell is. This is also the reason why, like Saturn, he was at Egghead. It's not like he needed to get teleported in. He was already there. He could have just gotten off the boat, turned into the devil, and then started turning up on everybody. But that's not how it happened. Saturn got summoned in to Egghead, even though he was right there on the shore, which tells me that Saturn had to go into the abyss, and then the demon had to take over the body that is Saturn. And then when he came back out of that pentagram, he was now no longer Saint Saturn, but he was the Gyuki specifically.
Yes, and like this is another screenshot I have of Saturn talking. The way he talks is very deliberate. And it says, "Why is it that human beings feel the need to do what they are explicitly forbidden from doing?" He specifically says human beings, talking like he isn't one.
Absolutely.
So that goes into what you were saying as well, that he is a literal devil.
A literal devil.
And the reason I feel like we can link this to the Holy Knights specifically is something that I have seen no one else really bring up, and that is the Saint Bliss or the Saint Briss, which is the ship that fell on the Straw Hats right after Alabasta on their way to Jaya. The reason we can connect this to the Holy Knights specifically is if you look at the flag or sail of the Saint Briss, it is a fully filled in sphere surrounded by a circle and an arrow in each cardinal direction. We look at when Somers was first summoned in during Elbaf, he has an almost identical tattoo on his arm. And we know that Oda doesn't do details willy-nilly. Hell, he created entire fashion brands from the clothes that the characters wear in the SBSs.
Exactly.
It feels close enough to where it has to be deliberate.
Absolutely. I think it's a fair assumption to say that that might be his Abyss Mark, or at least, you know, before we flesh this out, bare minimum, there seems to be a connection between the sales of the Saint Briss and this tattoo on Somers' left arm.
Oh, 100%. And I think it does have some sort of connection to Elbaf as well, but I'm not tacking this onto the theory itself. I just think there might be some connection just because the Saint Briss does look more Viking-esque. But why I believe this ties into the theory that of how to steal devil fruits is because on the Saint Briss, one of the things they found was a skull with 3 holes drilled into the top of it. And I'm looking at the panel right now. It says, over 200 years have passed since this man's death. He was in his early 30s when he fell sick during a voyage and succumbed to death. Seeing how the skull's teeth are still well attached to the skull, this raises a lot of questions. But first, I need to explain those 3 holes. Those 3 holes are a specific medical practice that was practiced like long, long ago in real life. It was a practice called trepanning, where they would drill 3 holes into the skull specifically to remove brain tumors, specifically. And I believe, like Chopper and Robin, the 2 people who would know about it the most are the ones who commented on the skull itself. And I believe that this has to do, in part, I think that the Holy Knights are performing devil fruit experiments on like civilians or like unassuming people or slaves, and then harvesting those devil tumors and giving them to Holy Knights with their contract of Emu.
Slight side theory to help connect back to this theory that I've been holding for quite some time. Whereas, who is Gunko? Huge question in the One Piece community right now. A lot of people are theorizing a lot of different things, but on a very simplistic level, I believe that Gunko, without the context of her being related to Brook in some capacity based on this most recent chapter, 1149, is a child that was captured by the world government at a very young age and then was indoctrinated into the ideology that is the world government, and higher up, more specifically, the celestial ideology, and then even above that, the Holy Knights being, you know, just better than everybody else, specifically with the way that Gunko speaks, you know, truly being, you know, a higher being than anyone that Gunko is coming across. and talking
Yeah.
down to everybody inherently. So Gunko, as a child, very well could have been one of the subjects of these devil fruit experimentations. The Holy Knights pre Gunko, or whomever was enacting Imu's will at that moment, could have found the person whom had the arrow fruit. The let's call it original arrow person, or the person before Gunko had that fruit. And
Yeah.
they hunted that person down, got them into captivity, did said procedure on them or something similar to it, and was able to take that arrow person's fruit from them and more or less implant that into Gunko. And Gunko is a proof of concept for this theory that you're looking at as well.
Yeah, or even theoretically, because the way I could see it happening is that they feed these like slaves or whatever the fruit, and if they're able to use the power well, they turn them into holy knights.
Yes.
They fail. They harvest the fruit.
Mm-hmm.
They harvest the tumor from them, give it to the next test subject, and try again. That's
Keep
how
it
I
pushing.
envision it. Yeah,
I fully agree with that.
and that's what I do think is happening with Gunko. And I know in the panel it says that he died of sickness, but that still wouldn't really dispel any part of this, because even if he died of sickness, you can still harvest the tumor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. The tumor's still there.
Yeah,
And as
yeah,
long as
like
you
you
catch
just
him in the
have to act
moment of
quickly.
him dying, you just have to get it before said devil fruit is able to fully remanifest elsewhere.
We have never seen this skull brought up anywhere else, or even the Saint Briss brought up again,
Yeah.
which feels that feels off. Like something so specifically as tray panning, that doesn't feel like something Oda would mention just for the sake of it.
Especially mentioning it in the context with Robin and Chopper talking about it, the only two people on the Straw Hats who would even have any idea what this is or that it could potentially have significance, which that leads me to potentially to jump a little ahead, the conclusion of this, or this theory being confirmed. It's going to be confirmed by Robin, because Robin will be the archaeologist who knows enough history about this, knows about this archaic practice. Like, with all love to Chopper, yes, he probably knows about the practice, but he doesn't have any, much more to add to it, because he's like a 15-year-old boy or something like that.
Yeah.
But Robin, with the world experience and everything that she has, she could potentially be the one to put together all these pieces, saying, hey, like, I read one time in a book when I was still studying about this procedure, and I also read this separate thing in a book about how devil fruits, leave the body, and she might be able to be the one to bridge that connection for us live on the panel.
This just popped into my mind. That's why they're taking the kids.
They're farming a workforce, one way or another.
Yeah, they said specifically that the Giants were going to be a large deciding factor in this war.
The deciding factor.
The deciding factor, yes, they said that. So what I believe they're going to do is that they're going to implement researched devil tumors into the kids.
Yep.
And or hold them for ransom at the threat of that, to either get compliance from Elbaf or have basically giant super soldiers.
Both of those are incredibly possible. I think the most realistic thing that we've seen this throughout the whole story, and this ties into a separate theory that we've been cooking as a community since literally the very beginning of Elbaf. Like, since the moment the Holy Knights dropped onto Elbaf, we've been talking about this theory, and I swear every single chapter is getting closer and closer to confirming it. For the reference of this theory that we're talking about, the world government has always had a fascination with giants, one way or another. And they've always been a relatively rare piece of the world government. Yes, the world government did have giants under its command, i.e. Jaguar D. Saul. Saul was part of the Marines until he realized, man, these guys ain't shit. So, that being said, I feel like the world government has always had a heavy fetish, for all intents and purposes, for the giants.
Yep. Oh yeah, 100%.
And obviously, in tandem, the world government has always been capturing kids and stealing them and indoctrinating them or something. They are rampant in the amount of times they have tried to steal children. Now, we go back to Punk Hazard. What was Caesar Clown doing? Caesar Clown was experimenting
on kids.
On kids, and not just on kids, but on kids to make kids giants.
Giants.
So that's the real connection there, is if the world government had made a decision, well, if we can't get the giants to be on our side, then we will make our own giants. That's where Caesar enters the chat, and he starts doing these experimentations on those poor kids and turning them into giants. Whereas now, Emu's like, you know what? Fuck doing all these experiments. Let's just go straight to the source and get them. So that is why they are going to Elbaf. And again, Gunko said specifically, like you pointed out, that the Giants will be the deciding factor in the war. Whatever side they land on will be it. Because even if we want to talk about how the Giants are low-key fodder on Elbaf right now based on what's going on, and there's a lot of reasons to that we can easily expand on, but not for this video.
Oh, yeah.
The Giants are inherently base stat level the strongest living creatures that exist on in this One Piece world. Just out the womb, Giants inherently have more strength, obviously longer lifetimes. In general, they are a, for lack of a much better way to put this, the more superior race as far as battling is concerned on this planet.
Canceled.
Yeah, canceled. You know what? You know what? I don't even care. Cancel me, man. Cancel me.
Yeah.
On the planet. So it makes sense that the world government would want to utilize their power to exert more control. And the Giants obviously have eluded the world government for this entire time. So, you know, the government wants to control everything. So if there's any corner of the world that they can't control, they're going to go for it. And the best way to do that is by taking that civilization's children and either leveraging them against them or indoctrinating them to hold the ideals that the world government wants them to hold, so that can just become, they can create a new generation of Giants that do believe in the ideology of the world government and know nothing about their actual culture and their actual history, which is also why the Holy Knights are hell-bent on burning down the library and the schools on Elbaf, because they are truly trying to erase giant culture and create giants whom follow the ideals of the world government only.
With like even Big Mom and Whitebeard not being giants, the absolute devastation that someone of their size was able to cause.
Yeah.
With a devil fruit, and then like having a giant with powers like that would be damn near unstoppable.
Damn near, yeah. If and to upscale what you're saying even more, Kaido did not even have an awakened devil fruit.
Yeah.
Like, Kaido is not awakened. So, and I think Kaido is our prime example to prove your point exactly. Assuming Kaido does in fact have ancient giant's blood in him, that is why he was already such a untouchable demon without an awakening. So, if he were to be able to awaken, Kaido would, I wholeheartedly believe Kaido would solo the verse if he awakened. Because Kaido is, again, back to our point earlier, as the way the world presents a character, he is the like Kaido will always win in a 1v1. Is what Oda says about Kaido for all intents and purposes. So we can make all of our arguments about could he beat this person or could he beat that person or would it be a good fight? Sure, there's plenty of good matchups that we can come up against, but no matter how you cut it, Kaido is probably going to come out on top in a 1v1. And with all of like what we saw in Wano with the entire, you know, roof piece, which what everyone calls it when they were up on the roof forever, Kaido fought 15 people before Luffy beat him. All in a row, back to back, and then started drinking halfway through the fight with Luffy, and he got wasted. So, like, no matter how you cut it, Luffy loses a 1v1 against Kaido 10 out of 10 times. 10 out of 10 times, like, as of right now, current One Piece Luffy. So, it makes sense why the government would want to do that.
And looking at the scoreboard between Luffy and Kaido still would have won.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because
Kaido
that's
killed
two
him
on
3
one.
times or something, like...
Yeah, like 2-3 times.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's Luffy's thing, not dogging it. You know, that was still a dope fight. But Luffy died like 1 or 2 times, at least 1 full time pretty much, fighting Kaido, and got utterly defeated 2 other times. So Kaido is 3, you know, he's 3-1 versus Luffy.
Yeah, and that's Luffy. Pretty much someone we can safely put at the pinnacle of One Piece.
Yeah, he's a god.
In terms of strength.
Luffy is god. He's
quite
god.
Literally got Toon Force. He only won because of the Toon Force 100%, power up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, also so because Kaido was willing to give him a chance. Because at the end of the day, Kaido just wanted a good fight on Wano. He didn't actually care about winning or losing. He wanted a good fight. So he was there for
He wanted to fight till he died. And you can see that even with the first moment he's shown in the series, jumping off Sky Island trying to kill himself.
Yeah, exactly. His whole thing is like, bro, I'm too OP for this world that it's all lost its luster. So someone pull up on me and show me something crazy.
So having something like that in the war, the world government would do everything they could to have that on their side. even in a slightly weaker state, like modern giants.
Agreed.
And I think that can play very well into the themes of Elbaf itself, because Elbaf, like I was explaining the other day, is all about existing in the present point in time and moving our way forward for the newer generations.
I
Because
fully
like
agree.
you see it with Gabon and how he was the left hand of the king of the pirates, and now he's settled down with a family.
Yeah.
Side note: Oda did not name him Mountain Eater for nothing.
Absolutely not. It wasn't because he was chopping up mountains, I'll tell you that.
You're gonna call him the Mountain Eater and then give him a wife that's a
That's a
giant.
giant, dude. Ugh.
But he's settled down with a kid now. And then you even have like the young giant children of Elbaf saying, "Oh, those warrior days, those are all in the past. We're moving past those.
Mm-hmm.
That's history. We're not like that anymore." Showing, and like this plays into the like trilogy of Wano, Egghead, then Elbaf,
Yep.
with Elbaf being like, "Hey, we're trying to modernize. We're not like how we were
Yeah.
before. We're improving as a society."
Elbaf is epitomizing what personal growth in a singular person looks like as a culture. They are personal growth,
Exactly.
but a culture growing with the times. Yes, there was a time where the giants were the most dominating race on the planet. If you came against a giant crew, you were gonna lose.
Hmm.
It was simple as that. But to that point, they are now putting a much heavier focus via King Harold. So shout out King Harold for having that. He's like, dude, we don't just need to be fighting. We should maybe open up our culture to other things, which of course ended up hurting him as well. But that being said, I think objectively he was right in the fact of you should open up to the better parts of other cultures so you can grow your culture yourself. You can only get so far through dominance, but you'll never be respected. You'll simply be feared, and we all know ruling through fear eventually crumbles every single time. um
Oh
and
yeah.
and it's really cool. So you that story is told in a multitude of ways. It's told through Loki and Harden as brothers, because Loki is the brother who would rather see Elbaf be a warring race, at least on the surface. Kid Loki, whom
Hmm.
we saw, was very much about the fight, about the scrapping, about the pride of what it means to be a giant, of Elbaf specifically, too. Having royal blood in him, or at least true Elbafian blood in him, versus Harden, which has who is like only half giant or half Elbaf giant blood in him. So he technically has dirty blood in him according to the royal lineage. And he is, yes, he's a pirate and he's out there fighting, but he is more for the culture and for the growth of the giants as a culture, not just as a warring race. And then we go the next generation down. So we were at Harold, who started the conversation of maybe we shouldn't be warring. He had two children who are kind of on either side of that argument. But Loki gets taken out and chained into the underworld. So he's taken out of the story. So whether he thinks that they should be a warring race or not doesn't matter, because he's no longer influencing Elbaf inherently. And then you have characters like Hiruden, and then the rest of the giants on Elbaf specifically. Another thing to point out, Dory and Bragi have not been on Elbaf for 100 years until literally the last 2 years. So, Dory and Bragi, being the greatest warriors of Elbaf at their time, are removed from the island, which makes sense for the island to then start losing its warring ways, because the two powerhouses that epitomized their warring nature no longer existed on a day-to-day thing for their culture. So now we go to this third generation, which we see these kids who are being taken by the Holy Knights. And when you see a character like Ronya from the most recent two chapters being more willing to sacrifice herself to save the culture than to let them burn the village down. I would
Bro, that broke my heart.
Ronya, dude, protect at all costs character, dude. That was, what a queen of a kid, dude. She was, oh my god,
Honestly.
dude. Just top to bottom, her selflessness as a child is just so impressive, dude. I love it to death. I'm blown away that character just out of nowhere became such a huge pivotal emotional character. I loved that arc. 100 years ago, if this situation happened, it would be, we're gonna fucking kill these holy knights. And now in the situation, we're having the conversation of, do we fight tooth and nail, or do we choose to protect our culture? And it's the conversation is shifting, and I think that's a really important thing to see within the context of Elbaf. Whereas this newest, youngest generation of Elbaf, outside of like Colin, pretty much, all is very, very for the culture and for learning and for just not focusing on war and strength and power itself. And I think that's the conversation that should be being had around the culture of giants currently.
And I do have like quite a few predictions for how Elbaf is going to go based on the themes of the arc that we've been seeing so far on like making it a more peaceful time for the current generation and making the present a better place.
Yep.
Because that's what I firmly believe that Elbaf is about. And
Which
it
also
tying into
extrapolates to
Wano
the
as
entire
egghead.
world. At the end of the day,
Oh,
like that's
100%.
the ultimate goal of all of this is focusing on culture and growth and connection and knowledge over strength, power, control, dominance.
Oh yeah, and there's a few specific things that I feel are going to hit before the arc's end. I believe that we're going to see conflict and some sort of resolution between Loki and Hiriden,
Yes, without a doubt.
and that I believe they are going to rule Elbaf together as co-kings.
Yep.
That's
Which is
what I
exactly
firmly
what
believe.
Harold wanted of them. That's what he said. Like, I look forward to the two of you bringing Elbaf into its next phase.
Exactly, exactly. So I don't think Oda would have mentioned something that offhanded as like to wax poetic about a character's two sons being able to lead at some point. I think it's very intentional in it being mentioned. I also think we will see a confrontation between Shanks and Shamrock.
The way Oda loves to parallel characters in stories. The parallel is two brothers on both sides. You have Loki and Haruden, which Loki is the bad guy of Elbaf. You know, as far as their stories are concerned, they think he's the worst. He's the scourge of the earth. He was prophesied to kill his father, and then he did that inherently. All around horrible guy. And you have Haruden, who has revived the giant pirates and is now like emerging as the next positive leader of Elbaf. But the two of them will be able to squash their beef, coexist, find a middle ground, and because of both of their power and influence, will be able to send Elbaf into a much more prosperous world. Whereas you have the two brothers Shanks and Shamrock, who are not going to be able to find that middle ground, and it will be a potential fight to the death, or at least a fight to the utter defeat kind of thing. So I don't think we're ever going to see Shamrock becoming a good guy and switching sides and being like, you know, damn, everything's cool now. But I think that would be the point, and that's going to be a massive character development moment for Shanks, not ever being able to truly get through to his brother. I think that's going to potentially cause some pretty heavy turmoil for Shanks eventually. Or it could even turn out that somehow Shamrock ends up beating Shanks to some degree. You know, that Shanks has to get beat at some point. Shanks will lose in this story. I fully believe that. I think he's probably going to lose to Luffy. I think that's like one of the most fated fights in this. But again, that's a theory for another time.
Oh yeah, 100%. What I see happening specifically with these two forces clashing, both being Loki and Harden, and then Shamrock and Shanks. Any way I think of how to phrase it, it sounds like I'm talking about like fucking like YouTube drama or whatever. But I think some good stuff will come out about Loki, framing him in a more positive light
Agreed.
and bringing out sins from the past from Harden.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could see a similar thing happening with a potential Shanks Shamrock backstory or flashback.
Absolutely. I like the spin that you're giving that on our presented good guys are not as good as they're being presented, whereas our presented bad guys are not as bad as they're being presented. And that's the whole like through the grapevine kind of like information. I think that's really, really good. I could absolutely see through the Loki side of it. Obviously, Loki has been framed to some degree for killing his father. The most important and really the only statement we have to truly go against that is Loki saying to Harden, you know in your heart, or you know that I didn't go into that with hate in my heart, or like I didn't kill our father with hate in our heart. So one way or another, that tells me that bare minimum, Loki did not plan on killing his father, or and did not want to kill his father. He still probably
Yeah.
did, but the why is the big reason here. And either way, that tells us that the why is not a malicious reason. It's some other, he was forced to for some reason or another. Whereas, same with Shanks and Shamrock, we know Shanks has gone to Marijois. We know for a fact that he went there once. And that's not me referencing the moment where we saw Shanks speaking to the Gorosei, because I'm pretty convinced that that was Shamrock right there. But either way, Shamrock does say that Shanks has been to Marijois one time. And so that being said, that could be the sin that Shanks made. And Shanks' sin could be very similar to what Garp's sin is, where, he's been very strong and he's had the ability to make changes, and he's chosen not to for whatever reason, whether it be a valid reason or a less valid reason. Shanks, to some degree, is complacent in the evils that have gone on in this world because he is so powerful and has so much influence, and arguably has not acted on said power and influence.
Oh yeah, 100%. And as you said that, I had a massive revelation. So I want to partially walk back something I said a moment ago. I don't think Loki and Hardin will rule together. I don't.
Okay. Why not?
So while we were talking about this, I remembered something. How we were talking and theorizing how if Somers was actually dead or not.
Yeah.
Do you remember what his devil fruit is?
It's the thorns
on a vine.
Thorns on a vine, yeah.
I believe that Somers might kill Loki. I believe it is like a twist and kind of like reversal on this old myth. I think I brought it up to you when Loki was first introduced, but the tale of Balder.
Yep.
So basically, Balder was a god in Norse mythology who everything created promised never to hurt him because he was just loved by all.
Yep.
And except for the thorns on a mistletoe, because they did not exist yet, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And I brought this up specifically when Loki was introduced because Loki, being a trickster god, Balder was like challenging people all the time, being like, try to hurt me, I guarantee you cannot. And so what Loki did, he took the mistletoe, and in some retellings I've seen, people have said it was like on like a blade or an arrow or something. But the one thing that's been consistent, Loki used that mistletoe and it killed Balder.
And that's what was able to kill Balder. So Loki embodying both, and dude, Somers being introduced as the thorn fruit inherently, that works way too well. I'll say this to help bolster your theory here, because I like that a lot. No matter how you cut it, I think Loki is too powerful to be a key player in any fights moving forward.
He's too strong to be alive.
Yeah, exactly. He's too strong for this story to make narrative sense. Like, the most annoying comment that I get in every single one of these streams these days is Loki going to be the next Straw Hat? Is Loki going to be the next Straw Hat? For a billion reasons, no. But let's just focus on this one reason right here. If Loki joined the Straw Hats, they could dominate the world today. Like today. Like right now,
if Loki
I think
joined the Straw Hats, they win.
They win. It's just over with, because the level, I mean, his size alone, outside of every ability that he potentially has that we don't even know about. Like, we don't even know what this man's devil fruit can do, and he's already showed the ability to burn down all of Elbaf just with his hammer. Like, if he joined the Straw Hats, there's no more good fights for them, dude. There's no more actual stakes in this. The power creep would just be insane. You could kick everyone off the Straw Hats except for the big three, and then slap Loki in there, and it's done. They win. They win. And so, narratively speaking, Loki's already been removed from the story because when they were bandaging him up and giving him some food, Homegirl said in that particular panel, oh, well, with the extent of his injuries, it's going to take months to heal, which inherently tells you no matter how you cut it, they are not letting Loki enter this fight. On Elbaf, at least. And at the most, maybe he does enter the fight in a month or 2 months, if the story even lasts that long, with the pace that we're going at as far as in-world time is concerned. 2 months could be the end of everything. Like very
Yeah,
easily could be the war at the Holy Land happened. Then we went to Laugh Tale. Then the Blackbeard fight happened, and then now we got the One Piece, and the main story is done. So
yeah, credits
arguably,
roll.
yeah, credits roll. So Loki never even has a chance to enter the fight. And I think
Yeah,
that's the point. Loki is just too strong of a character. So I actually think your theory is very, very likely that somehow Loki does actually just get murdered before he's able to really act and do anything, because he's too strong of a character. We introduced too powerful of a character to possibly be on the good guy's side.
yes, and this feels like too much of like a string to draw between the two to just leave it hanging. Like if Loki's going to die and there's a character with some sort of like thorn-based ability, and there's like such mythology behind Loki drawing him to something with thorns on it, the mistletoe, I feel like some sort of connection could be made.
I think that mistletoe connection is brilliant, and especially because it connects directly to Balder, and you made that Balder connection initially in the beginning of this arc with Loki.
What could connect it even more is because what is a holy knight? Someone seen as impenetrable, unable to be killed
Yep,
by
they're
anything.
immortal.
Yeah, yeah, essentially loved by all.
Or at least revered.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah, so I feel like this could work as a good twist on that folktale.
yeah, like literally just like switching the roles, and Balder's the bad guy and Loki's the good guy, and
Yeah,
and that's a total Oda coded thing to do, because he pulls from mythology, but then he just twists the hell out of it. Like yes, we got all this inspiration that's obvious, but none of it follows any of the actual mythology, because that would just be a rewriting of the same fucking story, and that's not what Oda's doing
yeah.
here. This is his own.
Like
Another
Oda has more than once put his own spin on things from mythology or even like folklore that don't necessarily follow it. You can even see it in like some of the silliest examples, like Chopper having a blue nose, for
Yes,
example.
exactly.
I feel like there's gonna be some sort of reference to Thor somewhere in here.
Well, so my argument is that Thor has already been referenced. I think we're kind of back. So,
What
so
was
go.
Thor referenced in?
Well, he's referenced in the hammer itself, but
Mjolnir?
they didn't use Mjolnir. The hammer is called Ragnir, so it is a different name. But I think this goes back to our point that we just made with Balder, whereas Oda is taking inspiration from all these mythologies, but he's combining them, separating things, mixing stuff up, swapping moments. So Loki at one time is representing Thor, Loki, and Balder. In different ways. He's Thor in the fact that he has a hammer that produces lightning. Like even though it's not called Mjolnir, Ragnir, for all intents and purposes, is Mjolnir. The only real distinction that we've seen is, or haven't seen but haven't had a confirmation either way, is like, can anyone pick up this hammer? Like if there was another ancient giant relative to the size of Loki, could that person just wield that hammer?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. I think that's a fair thing to say, probably, with the very little information we have on it. But I think Loki's just a combination of all of them. He'll be Balder because he's actually going to be the god who gets killed by that weakness, the mistletoe, the thorns.
Mm-hmm.
He's Loki in the fact of he's been demonized by the population, and he's considered to be a trickster and someone who's fake, which is not actually true, but that is the personality that the world has projected onto him. And the Thor part is that he's gonna be some level of savior and liberator for Elbaf inherently. I truly believe he's the liberation. If he calls himself Nika, and we look at the one panel where the giants are talking to Zoro about the god that they believe in, and the giants in the pub inherently are disagreeing on what kind of god Nika is. This is one of my favorite panels to pull from, because I truly do believe that there are 3 god fruits that exist, not just the Nika fruit, but there's 2 others. These giants say, no, Nika is a god of destruction. And then the next one says, no, he's a god of liberation. And then the third one says, no, he's a god of laughter. We've seen representations of all of those things throughout this story. Quite obviously, if we were to assume that there are in fact 3 devil fruits and they're not just all one, and those are just misinterpretations or side interpretations of what God can be, because you could look at Luffy and say he's all 3 of those things. Everywhere he goes, he destroys. Everywhere he goes, he liberates. Everywhere he goes, he laughs. So sure, Luffy fits all of that. But we could also just give Luffy's the god of laughter, So then we have two other devil fruits that we're wondering about, and one of them represents liberation and another one represents destruction. It's easy to jump to Loki being the god of destruction because that's what the world has painted him as. But I think it makes more sense for him to be the one of liberation. He was trying to stop Herald from opening up the gates to the rest of the world because he knew the rest of the world was going to infect the culture that is on Elbaf, which it obviously is. The fact that the Holy Knights can come here, steal children, burn shit down, I mean, he was right. Like, opening up to the world was a bad thing. So I think Loki and his fruit represents the Nika of liberation. And then I think we have yet to see yet to get a confirmation of the third fruit that would be the actual fruit of destruction, which I possibly think could be Ace's fruit. But again, that's a separate story. So all of that being said, I think that's how Loki represents all of these three people: Balder, Thor, and Loki.
I'm definitely behind that. You convinced me 100%. I think that third god fruit, I brought this up to you before, is Tsukuyomi. You've got Luffy, who's the sun and essentially just the sun and stars, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Imu, for example, will be filling in this place. Tsukuyomi, the moon.
The moon, yep.
And then Blackbeard is the black hole in the absence of space and light.
Luffy the sun, Imu the moon, and Blackbeard is all the darkness that exists behind that. Like all the empty space that is left.
Yes.
I love that.
So the way, and looking at it like this, you see the direct parallel between the sun and the moon being obviously Luffy going up against Imu, but then looking past that, you have to look beyond the moon to space and the darkness out there.
The actual darkness.
You still have to handle that.
It's a bigger problem, which is the vast amount of darkness that exists in the world with or without Imu. I think that's brilliant. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I
think that's where we're going.
I fully agree with that. I fully agree with that. Another thing that I was thinking, which is interesting, and I don't know if this is tangible or not, but back to the point of Blackbeard being a black hole, and that naturally pulls things into it. Blackbeard can be the thing that so in the Harley text, at the end of the first world and the second world, it says, and they will never meet. The sun and the moon never meet. That's an obvious bit of iconography that we have all throughout our real world and through One Piece. The sun rises, the moon rises, or the moon sets, and vice versa. They will never meet. But in the third world, they do meet. The reason they meet is because Blackbeard, with his black hole force to pull things into it, which also means pull things together, Blackbeard can be the center that pulls the moon and the sun into each other. Those two clash. That is where Blackbeard then gets to circumvent the fight, take Imu out himself, and then become the ultimate darkness that we now need to fight, where it's just the sun no longer versus the moon. Now the moon has been fully combined with inherent darkness, inherent evil, and now we have our final big bad. And Blackbeard's ability to pull things together is the reason that happened.
Oh, absolutely. And it even comes together symbolically like an eclipse. Whether it's a lunar or solar eclipse, that's to be determined.
Yeah.
I think this has been an amazing discussion, not even just going over the Blackbeard and devil fruit theft theory that I had, but expanding on other ideas we had as well. Like, obviously, we got sidetracked a bit talking about, like, Elbaf and how we think it's going to end, and, like, a war arc and everything. But being able to expand these ideas just, I feel like, helped in ways corroborate my theory even more.
Well, exactly. I think that's the best part of the way we had this conversation is we laid out the theory, and then using the pieces that are moving in that theory, we were able to pull all these other things into it that are actively happening and being shown to us, chapter by chapter, week by week.
Yeah, and even on things we had to make like a little bit of a jump on, like when I brought up how it says that the man died of sickness when he was on the St. Brice, there were still pretty explainable ways that could still tie in.
I think bare minimum, I don't think it's really I don't think we should focus on how that gentleman actually died. I think the facts of it are what's important, and any other speculation's not very necessary because it might lead us astray. The simple fact of the St. Brice has the same symbol that Somers has on his arm. which very
Hmm.
well could connect to the Emu Neurona family in general, but either way, minimum seemingly connects to the Holy Knights and their abyss traveling. The three holes in the skull just representing that type of procedure, which is super, super outdated and archaic. Them having Chopper and Robin be the ones to point that out specifically to us, I think that absolutely shows at least we can make the argument that the world government figured out about this whole devil tumor on the brain thing around 200 years ago. And that shows the beginning of their experimentation on how to manipulate where devil fruits go post death and how to just really help build their army and solidify them having the strongest versions of each devil fruit user they could possibly have.
Yeah, and I think it did also, in a way, put some more validity on Gunko being potentially Brooke's daughter or something.
Yes, yes.
Because you mentioned age freezing with the
Mm-hmm.
abyssal mark, and we could
Exactly.
easily draw that to Gunko having an abyssal mark, her being realistically way, way older.
Yeah, yeah. Realistically, Gunko is like 60 to 70 years old, IRL, assuming she is the child that we saw in that flashback on 1149, because Brooke has been on, Brooke was floating on the ship for about 50 years, between 50 to 60 years. So if
Hmm.
we assume that Brooke either had a child or at least was a father figure to this young girl whom we saw in that flashback, that puts her between 65 and 70, more or less in IRL years. And yeah, she's presenting as a teenager to very young adult. So yeah, and she also seemingly has very what I would consider teenage mentality uh, presented in a narrative because she's got headphones on. She's apathetic to the adults around her.
Hmm.
She also presents as a teenager who didn't have very much social interaction as through their developmental years because she doesn't understand the emotions that people are feeling, i.e., when Ronya is walking off the plank back onto land, crying and being sad because she wasn't killed and her culture is now being burned because of it. Gunko not understanding that, being like, why are you sad right now? Your life just got spared. Gunko not understanding the nuance as to what Ronya really wanted to save and having actual legitimate love and appreciation for something. Gunko entirely to me presents as the quote unquote angsty teenager who is also not socialized or ever felt love. So they're so disconnected and separated from like normal human emotion interaction. And they've been stuck in that stasis for about 60 years or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So that I feel like even from that base conversation we went into this with, we've been able to expound so much that it gives not only this theory more legs to stand on, but other ones that we had as well.
Yeah, no, fully agreed. This theory has done a good job of spiking into other theories that we've been working on, obviously creating new theories, and then yeah, just expanding upon the world that we know. I think this has a lot of legs. I think there's a lot to this theory, and I'm really, really looking forward to the next chapters coming out to help just continue solidifying this. I don't think it's going to be very long before we get some more confirmations on what this theory is. It's going to take some time for sure. I mean, the actual Blackbeard reveal is going to take, that'll happen virtually at the very end of this story or incredibly
Oh
close
yeah,
to it. But to that point, with the expansion of Gunko's past and her connection with Brooke, I think that's going to start opening a lot more doors to this theory. And bare minimum, the child indoctrination and then feeding them devil fruits to make them stronger, then to give Emu more powers via that path. I think that's all going to help add stairs to the final conclusion that we have of this is how Blackbeard's stealing fruits. It's based on this devil tumor on the brain. It's based on the fact that people have been doing that archaic procedure early on to figure this out more solidly, and then eventually that will finally lead into our confirmations on who the hell Blackbeard is, what his past is, potentially. I could see with this theory, the reason he had a troubled past. You said we're eventually going to get a flashback of his troubled past and all of that. It could very well be that the world government straight up used his parents to do something like that. You know,
yeah. Like I fully agree with that, and I say we're probably not getting that reveal for another 5 years or so.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that reveal isn't going to come until like the very very end of this, or at least just very close to the conclusion, because I do think we're really cooking on endgame stuff right here. But again, I can see the way the story is being laid out, that narratively we're going to get a lot more pieces to this very, very soon, and then it'll just continue compounding until we actually get to the true reveal.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I cannot wait to see that.
I know, I'm
Like,
stoked. Well, that is about all we have for this theory. I think we expanded on it quite well and presented as much of our case as we possibly can with some examples. Now I ask you, the community, to do your best to poke some holes in these theories that we have. Let us know in the comments where we went wrong with a couple of these lines of thoughts, or where you think we're going right. And if you have anything to add on to this to help expand upon this theory, I would love to hear it as well. We as a community have a Discord in my bio, the Drop Squad Pirates. Feel free to join that community where we theory craft on One Piece and a ton of other animes all week long, every week. We have streams and other community things that we do together where we talk about these things. Most importantly, the Sunday streams when we read the new chapter and do these theory crafting sessions live with the community. Make sure that you follow my homie Mel with these amazing theories and points. They have done an amazing job of laying this out. Make sure to give Mel a follow on YouTube, TikTok, IG, all linked in the bio below. Lock in with the community, and of course, let us know what you think. Tell the people you love them, touch some grass, drink some water, and we will see you guys in the next video.